Good morning and welcome to our webinar on navigating mental wellness strategies for conquering workplace challenges. My name is Staci Loalbo and I am a registered nurse and the Director of Wellness here at SWBC with Employee Benefits and Consulting Group. We are so excited that you've joined us today, but before we get started, I'd like to just go over a couple of housekeeping notes to get you kind of familiar with your audience console. So the first thing that you will see is you'll see some bios on the right-hand side. You'll see our pictures. If you click on the carets next to our names, it will reveal the full bio. And then we also have some widgets on the screen. And on those widgets, you can click any of those and kind of explore them. But one of the things I want you to pay special attention to is the one that looks like a clipboard. The one that looks like a clipboard will reveal a survey. So at the end of today's presentation, if you'll go ahead and take that survey and submit it to us for feedback, we would be so appreciative of that. If you have any technical issues today, please just try to refresh your browser first. That should take care of it. However, if you continue to have those issues, if you'll just submit your issues to the question and answer widget that you'll see on your screen, our team would be happy to assist you. And speaking of question and answer, if you would like to submit a question for us that we can answer for you, you can put that into the question and answer widget as well. And we'll try to get to all of those questions. If we don't, then we will submit you an answer later on in your email. We also have compiled some relevant resources, and we would love for you to browse those links and download those files for viewing at another time. And then finally, we will be recording this webinar and we can send it to you via email after the presentation. And you can share that with colleagues, friends, family, whoever you feel like might benefit from the information. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed guest, Dr. Stephanie Carter from the San Antonio State Hospital. And she is also the Director of Psychology. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
We're so happy to have you. But to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to become a psychologist, maybe a little bit about your job and how your journey has shaped your approach to patient care.
Okay. I think I've always been interested in psychology. My family always talked about psychology a lot. My brother ended up being a psychiatrist also. But I think it was the experience of seeing people that I knew and cared about growing up having and struggling with severe mental illness that really inspired me to become a psychologist. I was not sure what I wanted to do when I grew up, and still kind of figuring that out, as a lot of us are, I think. But I knew I was passionate about mental health and about helping people with mental illness, and I think that's what eventually got me to working at the state hospital, in the state hospital system.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this topic is because I myself have experienced some depression in my life. And it kind of came about when I had an elective surgery done. And afterwards, I just found myself not able to get out of bed. I was experiencing some sadness, some feelings of grief, and I wasn't really sure where that was coming from. And honestly, I just kind of pushed it aside and thought maybe this is the medication causing me to feel this way.
Right.
And unfortunately, talking through all of that, fortunately talking through all of that, I found that some unresolved trauma in my life, that surgery actually triggered that trauma, and it kind of came up, and that's kind of where that came from. And so if you will, maybe tell us a little bit about the signs and symptoms that we might not always be aware of that can come about when we're experiencing depression.
Yeah, depression is surprisingly common, really. And you make a really good point that a lot of people, I think, experience depression and don't really know that they're depressed or don't consider themselves depressed.
Right.
Some of the classic symptoms that you may have heard about are, when we're depressed, we have a depressed mood. We may feel sad or down, or going along with that may be a lack of motivation, a lack of kind of will or get up and go, a lack of energy, stuff like that. So feeling tired and feeling guilty and feeling full of dread.
Yeah.
These are things that, I think a lot of us experience from time to time. And, to some extent that's normal. We all have kind of ups and downs in our daily lives, but we may not consider it depression,
Would you say that there's like a difference between normal fluctuations in mood and more serious issues with depression?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand that it is normal to have fluctuations in mood. You know, we have kind of a baseline where we function, and we'll have good days and bad days kind of around that baseline. But if that kind of overall baseline moves, we're up here, we're down here, you know, we're having more bad days than good. We're having more trouble functioning, more trouble getting out of bed, stuff like that. It might be clinical depression.
Okay. Would you say that there are some physical and even cognitive responses when you have depression?
Absolutely.
And what would those be?
That's a really good question, because there are a lot of symptoms of depression that can be not what you'd expect, I guess. And some of them are physical and some of them are more mental or cognitive. Physically, people can feel tired, as I already mentioned, fatigued, just kind of feel crummy, you know, like something's not right. They don't feel like getting up out of bed. But they may assume something's physically wrong with them. I've had patients over the years that thought they might have cancer, or you know, or something terribly wrong with them, and they go to the doctor and they don't find anything wrong. And it turns out that it's, you know, it's related to depression. On the other hand, depression can also be associated with physical pain. So sometimes people have physical pain for which there's no apparent medical reason or cause. And sometimes people can take antidepressants or, you know, undergo treatment for other treatment for depression, and the pain gets better. It seems to be a part of the process.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's actually pretty interesting. What role would you say environmental factors such as work stress, personal relationships, what would those play into contributing to depression?
Well, you can't separate the environment from the person, really. You know, I mean, I think that the way we feel, the way we are, is such really a combination of our biology, our genetics, what we bring with us into the environment. It's the interaction. So, you know, some people are blessed to have a really supportive environment that's helpful for their mental health and supports well-being and wellness. And you know, a lot of us work in the real world where there are stresses and stressors, and you know, people's environments may not be so supportive. So if somebody is in a stressful environment where there's, you know, a constant sense of pressure, or you know, a lot of competition, or, you know, people aren't respectful, this can definitely contribute to depression and other mental health struggles as well.
I think sometimes we might come across somebody in our work environment that might be considered rude or disengaged. You know, how would we, and I think that we, you know, can identify that those people might be struggling with depression, you know. So how could we approach somebody, and even not even necessarily in our work environment, but somebody maybe even at home or just in our lives in general? How can we approach somebody who might be struggling with depression? What are your suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think the mindset that you have is really important. And you mentioned, like, you know, somebody that you work with might be irritable, or, you know, hard to get along with, or you know, even kind of hostile sometimes, or something like that. And it's easy to dismiss people as, you know, a jerk or whatever. But yeah, they're, you know, they're likely going through something, and just having that awareness and that acknowledging, just even within yourself, that, you know, maybe I don't approach this person like, what is wrong with you? And more like, gee, I wonder, how can I help this person? Or what's going on, and how can I help? That's huge.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, to support people with depression at work is to acknowledge, to acknowledge that there might be something going on, and just be supportive, to check in with people, you know, to ask how they're doing. You don't have to ask the right questions, or just show some support, show some genuine care.
And I think that was going to be one of my next questions, is for our managers, our supervisors, our directors, just being acknowledging of their symptoms, acknowledging of what they might be going through, and being supportive would be the best way to handle a situation like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard. I think for managers sometimes to deal with mental health issues because they're not as clear cut.
Right.
You know, you can't bring a diagnostic test from the lab that says, look, I have depression or whatever, you know. So managers may be skeptical or impatient or, you know, they just don't know about mental health issues, right? So absolutely, yeah, we need to acknowledge and, you know, realize that these are real issues, biologically based issues, just as physical illnesses are. And you know, we need to support our staff when they have these kind of issues, just as we would if they were having, you know, some problem with their diabetes or their heart or a physical injury or something else.
Right. Would you say that, like, taking some time off or even taking a break might be something that would be good for somebody who's struggling with depression, and just acknowledging that that's like you just said, it's a sickness, it's an illness, it's not something we can control, it's biological. So maybe understanding as a supervisor that taking time off for mental illness is just as important as taking time off for, you know, any kind of general illness.
Absolutely. Taking time off can be so important. I always feel guilty, honestly, kind of true confession here. I feel guilty sometimes taking time off. That's my neurosis. But I do. I will make myself take time off if I feel like I'm getting a little bit down or a little bit, you know, crispy, as we say, getting a little burnt out sometimes. It really is important to get away from get out of the work environment sometimes and kind of, you know, press reset, get a like almost like changing the channel, you know, in your mind to get into a different environment and let your mind, you know, do something else for a little while. Very, very important strategy for well-being at work.
Yeah. When would you say it's advisable to seek professional help for your depression?
Well, we always tell people that, you know, if you're having problems functioning, if the symptoms that you're having are making it hard for you to live your life, to go to work, to be productive at work, to have relationships, stuff like that. You know, if it's getting harder to function, if it's, you know, you're finding it hard to just live your life the way you want to live your life from day to day, that might be time to look at getting some help.
Seek help. Okay. All right, that's really good information. What I'd like to do now is kind of shift our focus to stress and anxiety and talk a little bit about, like, maybe what the symptoms are for those two things. How can you tell that somebody's struggling? How can you tell you know, in yourself that you're struggling with anxiety and stress?
Yeah, well, don't let me get too far afield, but I want to point out first that not all stress is bad stress.
Yeah.
We need a little bit of stress, just as we need exercise and we need stimulation to be our best. Stress isn't necessarily bad,
right? But
we know that, of course, it can become toxic and really damaging to our health if it's left untreated. Anxiety and stress really go hand in hand. I mean, they're not exactly the same thing, you know, according to the textbooks, but they do go hand in hand. Anxiety is more of a condition in which we worry about things that may or may not be worth worrying about.
Right.
We may have trouble relaxing. We may have trouble sleeping, letting down on our guard, or you know, just being relaxed and letting things go.
Right.
And kind of like depression, anxiety can kind of sneak up on a person. It can start gradually. It can be long term. People may not even really realize that I have anxiety. You know, this is not how everybody is. You know, so anxiety and stress, both very common, I think, and things that can really interfere with the workplace quite a bit. Yeah.
And would you say that anxiety, like depression, also plays into genetics? Like, is that something that...
Absolutely, yeah. So just as you could inherit a predisposition for having something like heart disease or diabetes or, you know, high blood pressure, you can inherit a tendency or predisposition to have either depression or anxiety or any other, you know, number of other mental health
Yeah,
issues.
that's interesting.
But the good news is that genetics is not 100% destiny.
Right.
And again, it goes back to that interaction between our genetics, our biology, and the environment.
Mhm.
So, for example, there have been studies that show that people who are predisposed to have anxiety, if they are in a really supportive environment, for example, children that grow up with really in supportive families, they have a lot of peer support, they don't generally go on to develop anxiety disorders in the same way that others do, that don't have that same kind of support.
Right.
So we have to remember, we may have that predisposition to have anxiety or depression or whatever it is, but we can still work with that, and we can make changes in our lifestyle and in our environment to support our wellness.
And I think that was that leads into my next question, how the landscape of workplace anxiety evolved post-pandemic, and does it contribute? Does our environment contribute to our anxiety?
Oh my gosh, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think the discussion has changed a lot in the past just few years since the pandemic, really. It seems like the pandemic probably forced the issue a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because I think it affected people's mental health so much. So I feel like we're talking about anxiety and other mental health issues so much more than we used to. There's a lot more coverage.
Yeah.
We have athletes and other people that are well known. We just have Miss USA gave up her crown, I think, yesterday or something for mental health reasons or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a lot more coverage.
Very brave.
Very brave. And I think this goes a long way towards eradicating the stigma that's always been associated with mental health problems. So this is great. And another thing that I think is positive is that the younger generation, younger people seem much more willing to talk about it,
Absolutely,
to have acceptable boundaries around their mental health, and to say what they need, and to admit when they have issues with their mental health that need help.
Yeah,
so I think
I would definitely
positive.
agree with that. And I think it definitely is positive. It's actually caused me to talk a lot more about my mental health issues with depression. And, my sons are, very open about how they're feeling and stuff like that. And I think that's just wonderful. However, on the flip side of that, there are a lot of older generations that like to stuff it all down and not talk about it, you know? And so how would you say that we could, try to encourage them to speak about their mental health more?
Yeah, I kind of come from the tail end of that, stuffing down.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're not going to probably turn, people my age and older, we're not going to convert them into young people that are, absolutely comfortable about talking about. But I think we can sort of set the tone and set the table for those kinds of conversations, and again, destigmatize as much as we can. And when we have, when we know people who we suspect may be depressed or maybe anxious or just kind of in a bad place, to just have a conversation about it, and to acknowledge it. Again, people may or may not be comfortable talking about it, but often just an expression of concern, goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being available and having the resources available too for people to talk about it. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. What challenges would you say in a remote work scenario that might contribute to the increase in anxiety?
Yeah.
Maybe when they have to come back to the office per se.
Right.
When being at home for so long. How's that going to look? How do we work through that?
Yeah, remote working is complex, isn't it? Because I did a little bit of it during the pandemic, and on the one hand, I loved it because I love being at home with my dog and, and being on the couch.
Working in the garden.
Being in the garden, exactly.
Like we spoke about earlier.
Right. All those good things. But working from home also can increase our sense of isolation a little bit. We get a lot of connection through our work, that we take for granted, I think. And connection is one of those things about the environment that helps us to keep from getting anxious and depressed and stressed. When we feel supported and connected to other people and to other things, plants, people, pets, whatever it is, we seem to feel better. So I think the pandemic, while there were benefits to people working from home, it also increased a sense of isolation for some people. And then there was, I think, coming back, people have a lot of resistance to having to, get dressed, put on pants, be presentable, go into the office, and to do all the things that we used to do again. So I think there's been a lot of stress just having to kind of get over that hurdle, getting back into the office and get back to all the things that we used to do, that we used to find so effortless. But after a couple of years of working from home, it changed the landscape quite a bit.
For sure. And when would you say it's advisable to seek treatment for anxiety? Would it be kind of the same as with depression?
Yeah, I would say so. And again, it's I have experienced anxiety in my life, and I didn't, when I was younger, I didn't really call it that. I thought, oh, I'm always so stressed out. I'm always so stressed out. But as I got older and I was having trouble sleeping, and that leads to having trouble at work, concentrating. And when you start to have those kind of, problems functioning as well as you want to. And for people with anxiety, well, really anxiety and depression, sleep disturbances are often a big problem, and can make you feel pretty lousy when you're not sleeping very well. So lots of times that can be a motivating factor to get somebody to seek help. But again, if you're having trouble functioning, or when you just get to that point where you feel like, I just can't.
I can't do this anymore.
Might be good to check in with somebody.
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of bring up the topic of treatment, because although I think that medication, and I know you would agree with this, medication is great.
Absolutely.
And it helps a lot of people. There are other ways, to deal with anxiety and depression. And as somebody who loves yoga and meditation and stuff like that, can you talk a little bit about, other things that we can do, to help us overcome, these types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Medication is a great resource that we have, a good tool in our tool belt for helping us manage depression and anxiety. And so that's a great starting point. And for a lot of people, if they're really severely impacted, they may need that depression, that antidepressant or whatever to just kind of get them to participate in treatment.
Right.
But these are if you want to think about it, kind of like imbalances in our biology. Our nervous systems are a little bit kind of out of tilt, and there are a lot of things that we can do lifestyle wise, activity, stuff like that, to address that. So absolutely, exercise is a really important piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. It is for me. If I don't exercise, I get very cranky pretty fast. Have to do it. That can be hard. I know when people are depressed or anxious, they may not want to exercise. So it's important to find something that you like. It doesn't have to be yoga.
It can be gardening.
It can be gardening.
Yeah.
It can be anything that gets you up off the couch, really. It really doesn't matter that much what it is. Just move.
Right.
That helps. Finding, things that you like to do. One of the problems with depression, and even with anxiety a little bit, can be that we don't take pleasure from things as much. That can be kind of a challenge. So I would encourage people to find something that they like to do if they can, and to spend some time and to really devote some time to doing that outside of work, outside of their responsibilities. Diet is another, nutrition is another huge factor. More and more research these days is talking about the interaction between our gut and our brain. And the things that we eat and the way we take care of ourselves and the presence of depression and anxiety. So, the bad news is that sugar, refined sugar and processed foods are not doing your mental health any favors. I hate that because I love me some French fries.
Exactly.
But really, studies are finding that ultra processed foods are not, like I said, not doing you any favors. But, whole foods, less sugar, less caffeine. These are some other good good things to try. But again, I would encourage you also to, to talk to your friends, talk to your family about what has worked for them. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is a really great resource for a lot of people. There are a lot of different types of psychotherapy and different types of psychotherapists. So if you go to one that doesn't seem like, I'm not sure this is, what's going to work for me, you might try something else.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice.
But it's probably going to be a combination of lifestyle choices and treatments that will help somebody in the long term the best.
Yeah, I've always found getting outside, like we were talking about today, how we both like to be out in the garden, be outside. I've always found that vitamin D has really helped a lot, significantly for me. I love to flower garden. I'm out there for hours after I get off work and just watering my plants and pruning my plants and stuff like that. And it just brings me such joy to be out there in the sun. And so finding anything, like that gives you, motivation.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And the good thing about spending time outside too is that newer research is showing that 10, 20 minutes outside a day is really good for your brain, good for your body, good for your nervous system. It helps to kind of recalibrate your biological clock. You may find that you sleep better when you have time outside, and that your mood is better, and even hormones may be better balanced when you have regular time spent outside getting sunshine. So.
Well, I'm making the right choice there.
You definitely are, yes.
For myself. Transitioning to the topic of burnout, can you share some insights on recognizing the signs of burnout in oneself?
Oh, yeah. Burnout is, it can be kind of sneaky, I think a lot of us, as I kind of say, dance with burnout a little bit, like you're getting a little closer and then maybe you back off a little bit from it. But I think a lot of us experience some kind of burnout from one time or, at one time or another, and related to just kind of getting in too deep, not giving ourselves those breaks that we need. And you kind of almost start to go down a rabbit hole with negativity and anxiety and resentment and, lots of negative kinds of emotions. So it could be hard to, I think, to see yourself as sometimes in that picture. But I think when we start to have the kind of dread that you hear about, the Sunday scaries they talk about, right? Like when you're just dreading that next day at work and wishing, could I call in sick? Or, is there some way I could get out of going to work tomorrow? Or lots of resentments and anger, or if you're having trouble relaxing when you come home and having a lot of negative thoughts. There may be some burnout nipping at your heels a little bit there. And one of the best remedies for burnout, I think, is time off, really. Take some time off. Take your, turn your phone off. Take your vacation time. Absolutely. Take your vacation time, please. Turn your phone off. Don't check your email 10 times a day. Really give yourself a break and let your mind kind of detach from all the stuff at work and refocus onto something that's more positive, more affirming for you.
Yeah, as a nurse, I've definitely experienced that. And I think because you come across so many traumatic situations in nursing as a doctor, it came on pretty quickly for me in several different scenarios, and so definitely taking time off helps, and or even just talking to somebody, about the trauma that you've experienced.
Absolutely.
Because it can happen in any field. Obviously it can happen in any field, but in the medical field you experience that trauma so often. Sometimes it's easy to get the dread,
It is.
So
and I encourage people, just like you're saying, to take breaks during the day. Not just take a vacation, but one thing I do at work, I always do the crossword, New York Times crossword puzzle at work. I bring my iPad and just throughout the day, I'll take 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And that's my kind of guilty pleasure, but it gives me something, again, I enjoy it. It gives me something else to focus on at times during the day. It gives my mind a little bit of a break. It could be music, it could be anything. Go out to your car and listen to some music if you have to,
sometimes I'll bring my earpods and I'll listen to a podcast or I'll listen to a show or something like that and just kind of calm down. I've even gone and sat in my car or brought shoes to work and taken a walk. A couple of girls that sit next to me have done that. And so we've been talking about getting our shoes on and taking a walk around the block. You know, that's definitely something you can do to try to help.
That's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
And also it encompasses another good tip, I think, and that is to find kind of allies at work, people that are positive, people that support you, and people that you feel like you can go talk to and seek them out, you know, when you need to have a safe place to vent, do it.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely. Just talking to people helps, you know, if it's the right people. You want to kind of identify, like I said, positive people, allies. Yeah, get out, take a walk. That's one of my other favorite things to do to cope with stress is put on your shoes. If you don't have them on already, walk around the building or whatever. Just get some fresh air. Switch the channel of your mind. You know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Those are all really, really good tips and tricks. And I'm so appreciative of your time here with us today. I want to kind of switch over because I think that we are going to have a question and answer session. And I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. So let's go ahead and see if there are any questions that were submitted beforehand. And we'll give them a second to get that going. Let's see. So we have our first question coming in right now.
All right.
Let's see what that says. And please bear with us. We're getting that question in. Okay, since SWBC partners with the American Heart Association to promote employee wellness, how does mental and physical health connect?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You can't disconnect them. I think they're connected. I mean, they are one and the same, really. You know, our mind and our body really is one unit, basically. So we know from years of research that our physical health can affect our mood and our mind, and our mind can affect our physical health. But again, they're really not separate. They're really one and the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that putting a lot of stress in your life can cause, you know, your heart to react. That can mess with your blood pressure, you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
All of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, there was research, goes back a few years, on what they used to call a type A personality. And there was a lot of research that showed that this type A personality, which is kind of characterized by being really perfectionistic and achievement oriented, driven, you know, really a go-getter, they tend to have more problems with their hearts. They tend to have more cardiac disease and, you know, kind of worse outcomes. And when they look at they being the researchers, look a little more specifically, they find that it's hostility and anger, really, that is so hard on your heart.
I bet,
basically. So,
just being angry.
Yeah, holding in anger, resentment. Again, get out and talk to people if you need to express some of that out, you know.
For sure.
But yeah, hostility and anger appear to be, you know, some of the worst things for your cardiac health.
Yeah. Let's see. I think, why would you say that staying active is important for mental well-being?
Well, staying active is important for your physical well-being, and so what's important for your physical well-being is also important for your mental well-being. But that said, there's lots of reresearch that shows that just being active just simply helps your mood. It helps you to feel better. Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be a certain thing. You know, don't feel like you have to go to the yoga class or whatever.
Right.
Whatever you enjoy. Playing golf, whatever it is, you know, just being active.
My husband would love that. He loves to play golf. Let's see. We have a couple more questions coming in. Is there a way to prevent mental health problems from ever creeping in?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, it probably depends on how we define mental health problems.
Right.
I think we cannot escape suffering in this life.
Sure,
I mean, this is the bad
absolutely.
news, right? You know, things are going to happen. We're going to experience losses. We're going to have bad days. We're going to be sick sometimes. But if we can try to surround ourselves with supportive people and take care of ourselves, stay connected, you know, to the things and the people that we love, then we're going to be in much better shape to weather those kinds of storms through our lives. And, you know, yeah, you know, mental health problems or mental illness, not inevitable.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know, but it does take some effort. It does take some practice and some, you know, some effort to keep your mental health up, I think, just as it does your physical health.
Absolutely. Let's see. My team is all remote, and I want to support them to the best of my ability. Are there any strategies that I can look into that will help to provide them with the support that they need when experiencing any of these challenges?
Yeah. I think, again, remembering the importance of connection. So, and that can be lost a little bit when we work remotely. So, you know, if you have a team that works remotely, maybe scheduling regular time to check in with people, you know, maybe a once a week check-in, just, you know, if not to talk about work, to you know, to also check in on well-being, right, and stuff like that, and to communicate to your staff the importance of their well-being. I always try to let my staff know, you know, I want them to be well. I want them to be happy. I want them to, you know, to like their job. So, you know, please, I ask for their feedback so that we can, you know, create that kind of environment for them. So,
Well, maybe even having some sort of like a team building event.
That's the other thing.
You know, like a lunch or even a dinner or a happy hour or something like that.
That's the other thing I was going to get to. Yeah, it was maybe scheduling some actual virtual time, or real time, you know, together outside of the remote environment. To reestablish connections.
Yeah, and that also depends on where they are. So if they're in another city or something like that, maybe they can't get together. But you're right, you can schedule virtual time. You can reach out to your team members and talk with them.
And maybe have some time where people can relax and let their hair down a little bit. It doesn't have to be a happy hour, but you know, something where, you know, you do an icebreaker or something where people are a little more relaxed, and you know, you're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary, maybe.
They have those escape rooms. I don't know if you've ever seen those. So much fun.
I haven't done one, but some of the people at work have done that. Yes, that's definitely a big thing.
We've done. My husband and I and our kids have done that before, and it's a lot of fun. It's really, you have to work together. It's like a team building type of a thing, and so you have to work really hard together before the time runs out. You know, to get out of your room. Yeah. So that's something you could always do. That's a good tip. With today's culture of go, go, go and faster, 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 what are good strategies to approach these topics of slowing down a bit, taking small breaks, etc., with your employees?
Oh, this is a good question for me, because I get into that go, 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 fast, fast, fast. I try to remind myself several times during the day, and even will make an external reminder for myself, slow down.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you actually slow yourself down, how everything seems to slow down. You think it would be the opposite, right? You think I'm going fast, so I'm doing everything fast. But it doesn't really seem to work that way.
Yeah.
So I practice meditation, and I try to practice mindfulness during the day. So I'll give myself a reminder to be mindful of my mental state and my, you know, my physical state too, of go, 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 and just take some deep breaths. You know, take a break, like we've talked about. But sometimes you have to set even like an external reminder, like a note on your computer or something, or a reminder on your phone. Take some breaths, do some deep breathing. This is another great tip for people with anxiety or stress, to do some breathing exercises. And, you know, whether you think you have time or whether you want to do it or not, just do it. It just takes a second, and it can really have a huge impact.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. Let's see, what's the next one? What are some good resource programs that you can recommend for somebody who doesn't have anyone to talk to or doesn't want to talk to somebody that they know? Therapy can be really expensive and have additional are there additional resources that can be recommended?
Well, for a lot of people have an EAP. I know we do where I work. We have an EAP where you can get a certain number of sessions, usually either at no or a very low cost.
Right.
And that can be a really nice resource for people. Sometimes that can be extended into, a therapy, or maybe that's, not necessary. You might just need a few sessions. So I think, an EAP sometimes, and also just talking to, like I said, anybody that is supportive. If you're a churchgoer, maybe your pastor or somebody, somebody in your church, somebody in your family, anybody that can lend a supportive ear. That's it's not to say that's absolutely replacement for therapy.
Sure.
But talking really does help.
It does. It really does. And there are also some apps online that you can download. BetterHelp is one of them.
Yes. That's the next thing I was going to talk about too.
BetterHelp is one of them. And I don't remember the names, and we will follow up. I'll make sure that we follow up with this. But there are some, I think one of them might be called White Flag, where you're actually not talking to a professional, you're talking just to other peers. So if you're not really wanting to go to therapy quite yet, you're not at that, you can always download this app. Like I said, it's called White Flag. And when you raise your white flag, you're basically saying, I need help. And then somebody will connect with you, and just to be there as a support. And it's all anonymous. You don't have to, tell them who you are or anything like that. And I know that's one good way to get support from somebody if you're not ready to go to therapy, or you're not ready to talk to a family member.
What a great resource. I'm really glad you brought that up.
I think I learned about it from somebody on Instagram that I followed. She's a comedian, but she really struggled with depression. And I remember her bringing that up, and she promotes it a lot because she said it's just been so helpful for her, to talk it through with other people.
Yeah. Therapy is really, the landscape has changed. There are apps where you can engage with a therapist over text, for example,
for sure.
And, over the phone, whatever. So there's a lot of ways.
And obviously I want you guys to be safe, find those reputable sources that are like the White Flag, don't download any anonymous chat applications that can be dangerous. But let's check with the next question. I don't believe burnout is an actual medical condition, but it does tend to creep up on us sometimes without us realizing it. What can managers do to have a greater awareness of burnout as it develops, and hopefully before it becomes a bigger problem?
Yeah. I think the answer kind of is in the question, that the managers, if they have a greater awareness of burnout, then that's really helpful, basically. I think managers need to know this is a very real, a very real issue. It's a very real cause of absenteeism, of people of walking off the job, of people quitting and turnover. Absolutely. So having that awareness and realizing, I think that you gotta treat your people well if you want to produce. If you want to be productive, you really need to treat your people well, and part of treating people well is trying to help them with burnout. That's not to say we can prevent everybody from getting burnout all the time or whatever, but we need to be aware of it. We need to know that it can happen and look for the signs. Like I said, the little kind of signs of dread or resentment or rolling the eyes or not my job kind of responses that we get. Maybe when you kind of start to get that vibe from an employee, it's time to have a conversation with them about their workload or their outlook, or how are things going for you, and not from a accusatory, like, what is going on with you? But again, it seems like there's some negativity going on. What's going on? How can I help?
How can I help?
How can I help you? How can I help?
Awesome. Let's see, the next question. I seem to struggle with getting work off of my mind when I leave the office. What are your recommendations for those that struggle to decompress after work?
Yeah, there's a lot of us, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's easy to come home from work and you get on the couch and you're on your phone or your laptop or whatever, and you're just kind of going through the motions, but you're still kind of thinking about work or something that happened or that interaction.
Yeah.
And, we've talked today a few times about kind of switching channels in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think one of the key things to do, or ways to do that, is to try to find something that really engages you,
Mm-hmm.
engages your attention, engages your attention, engages your focus, basically. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what it is, again, for some people it might be knitting, people like to knit. It really absorbs their attention. They're having to use their hands. It might be watching a funny movie. Sometimes you want to watch, something that makes you laugh, but finding something that you can do when you get home, or maybe a variety of things, because there might be, different days you need to do something different, but something that will really engage your attention, engage your mind, cause you to focus on something else.
Yeah.
For you, it may be flowers and getting
Right.
out in the garden, and you have to, really focus on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And some people enjoy doing, yoga. One of the reasons it really helps is because you have to focus on it.
Yeah,
you have to think about what you're doing. You can't stand on one leg, if you're thinking about what you're going to say to that person that emailed you
right
at the end of the day or something like that, right? You have to give it your full attention. So basically try to find things, or at least one thing that you can give your full attention. Think something that like grabs you,
right.
that engages you, that you can really give your focus to when you get home. That might take some trial and error. It might take you a while to find a few things.
Yep, for sure. Let's see. How does someone in an HR position not become burnt out when you're too busy helping everyone else? Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
Lot of people are so focused on helping so many other people. But moms, that's a big problem for moms. We're so focused on doing our work at work, doing our work at home, doing our work with our kids, our husband, our friends, and then we never focus on ourselves. So how do we, shift and self-care, take care of self,
right. Self-compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a huge question. I think we have to first acknowledge and kind of wrestle with the fact that we are as deserving of care and attention and compassion as anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot constantly give our compassion, our kindness, our resources to other people without giving it to ourselves,
mm-hmm.
or else we come up empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a well. If we keep pulling from our own well to give to everybody else, I mean, that's a beautiful thing, but your well is going to run dry. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to make an effort. You're going to have to give yourself permission first and make a concerted effort to devote some time to yourself. And that might mm-hmm. mean some of the things we've talked about today, taking breaks, doing things you enjoy, but it might also involve self-compassion, like, having that same kind of attitude of, well-wishing and kindness mm-hmm. and gentleness that you have for other people, for yourself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we could talk a lot about self-compassion, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of, this is kind of a newer field out there. So I would encourage the viewers to Google self-compassion if that rings a bell at all, because there's a lot of like self-compassion exercises that you can do. Dr. Kristen Neff is at UT Austin, and she does a lot of research on this and has some really good resources out there for people.
That's great. I'd love to look into that.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Great. Well, I think that comes to the end of our question and answer session. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us and answer our questions and to give us these great tips about depression, anxiety, stress, and burnout. I mean, it's just been a wealth of information, and we're so thankful for that.
Well, I'm so grateful to be here, and I've had a great time. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. And I just want to mention, if you yourself are struggling with any of the topics that we've covered today, depression, anxiety, stress, burnout, please see, and you feel like it's gotten to a pretty dangerous level, please see your primary care physician for help. Get an appointment with them and talk with them, and hopefully they can refer you to the right person or get you some help that you need. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, it is really important to get help. And so we want you to contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. Or you can just text the number 988 and somebody will be available 24/7 to get you through that, okay? And then last but not least, if you would like to know anything about, San Antonio State Hospital and how they support, their patients, how to donate to San Antonio State Hospital, even how to volunteer, please visit their website. I think it's hhs.texas.gov, and then just search San Antonio State Hospital. And if you get to their website, there's also a volunteer council that you can be a part of, and I think that they would greatly appreciate that. And please, if you can, hit that little icon that is a clipboard, submit the survey so that we can have some feedback about our talk today. We would love the feedback, and that will help us adjust in the future for future webinars. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next time.